Alright, so last video we learned how to solve when your equation was already factored. Now we're going to factor like we did the last few chapters, and then now we are going to factor and then solve. So if we have an equation that looks like this, you first need to get it equal to 0, which it is. So now we look for our step 1 of factoring is GCF. So we look, what do they both have? They both have an x, so we take out an x. We're left with x and x plus 3. And that equals 0. So now we do our zero product property, where you set each equal to 0. So we set this equal to 0, and then this equal to 0. So x would equal 0. X plus 3 equals 0. So x would equal negative 3. So those are our two answers. So the new, quote-unquote, new thing that we're learning is this step right here. We're just splitting up. We're getting this equation right here. We're factoring it, and then we're solving it just like we've done before. So now we're taking chapters 13, 14, 15, and adding them to the 16. So now we get an equation, a trinomial, 3 terms, and we take your first term, multiply it by your last term to get 10, and we write down all the factors of 10. So we have 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and we see what adds to negative 7. Well, if we need to add to negative 7, then we know that these all have to be negative. Okay? Because the negative times the negative is a positive, so they both have to be positive or both have to be negative. So this equals negative 11, this equals negative 7, so this is what we want. So we have d squared minus 2d minus 5d plus 10 equals 0. We split it down the middle. I'll do a new color so we can see. So we take out your GCF here, which is a d minus 2. We take out your GCF here. Remember, if the first term is a negative, we always take out a negative. So it becomes negative 5, which that becomes d minus 2. Remember, if you take out a negative, all these signs change, so this needs to change to a negative, and that equals 0. So then these two become d minus 2, and that becomes d minus 5. And remember, we did this last chapter, so it shouldn't be new. Just a little reminder. Remember, this comes down here, this comes down there, and your d minus 2 comes there. So then, now we're adding on solving. So d minus 2 equals 0, and d minus 5 also equals 0. So your two answers are d equals 2 and d equals 5. Now we can, like I said in the previous video, that if you see a d squared, that means we're going to get two different answers. Okay? If it was a d to the third power, then you should get 3 answers. But d squared, we get 1 answer, we get 2 answers. Alright, so our last example is just a little bit more complicated factoring problem. So then now we have our first times our last, which is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. And we write down all the factors of 6. We have 1 and 6. We have 2 and 3. Now remember, if it's positive, that means that they both have to be positive or both negative. So it has to be negative 1, negative 6, or negative 2, negative 3. Now since this is a positive 5 in the middle, It can't be this one because that's 7, and it can't be these because those are negative answers. So it's not any of those, but this does equal 5. So that is our answer. So then we have our 2r squared plus 2r plus 3r plus 3 equals 0. So all I did was splitting up that middle term into your 2 and 3r right here. Okay, so split up that middle term into 2 terms. Now we split it down the middle. We take out your GCF, 2r, r plus 1. We take out a plus 3, which is r plus 1. So it becomes r plus 1 times 2r plus 3 equals 0. We set both of those equal to 0. R plus 1 equals 0. 2r plus 3 equals 0. R equals negative 1 is one answer. And then 2r equals negative 3. We divide by 2. R equals negative 3 over 2. And you can just leave these in fraction form when you are doing solving problems like this. You don't need to punch in your calculator and find your decimal. So we have r squared. That means we should get 2 answers. We have one answer here, one answer there. So we have done factoring before. So this was all before. You've known how to do that. All we're doing is we're adding the equal 0 part of it, which is solving easy equations. All right, now you try.